Welcome. You've arrived at a quiet place. There is nothing you need to do right now. Nothing you need to solve. Nothing you need to carry. This is a gentle myth, told slowly, meant to soften the day and allow the night to take its time. If you are lying down, let your body rest into the surface beneath you. If your eyes are open, they may close whenever they wish. Take a slow breath in and let it out gently. You don't need to control your breathing. Just notice it. The city was still awake, but not in the way people usually imagined. It wasn't buzzing or demanding or loud. It was awake the way a river is awake at night, moving quietly, steadily, without needing attention. The streets carried a soft glow, and the buildings stood tall and calm, holding the warmth of the day like a memory they were willing to release slowly. Traffic lights changed colors even when no one was waiting. Red faded into green, green into yellow, each shift unhurried and patient. The city did not rush itself. It never had. It only responded to the pace people brought with them, and tonight, that pace had finally begun to slow. High above the street, in an apartment with windows facing the skyline, someone sat on the edge of their bed. The day had been long, filled with movement and noise, with messages arriving faster than thoughts could settle. Now the phone rested quietly on the table, the screen dark, and the room felt larger because of it. The air drifting in through a slightly open window was cool and gentle, brushing against the curtains as if reminding the room that the night had arrived. Across the street, lights began to turn off one by one. Each darkened window felt like a quiet agreement to rest. Offices that had been filled with voices and urgency earlier in the day now stood still, desks empty, chairs pushed in, screens finally allowed to sleep. The city held these moments without comment, without judgment. At street level, a late-night bus pulled up to the curb with a soft sigh. Its doors opened and closed, and it waited, unbothered by time. A few passengers stepped off, moving slowly, their footsteps unsharp, no longer racing anything. They carried their tiredness gently now, like something that could finally be set down. A street vendor packed away their cart with careful movements, not because they were slow, but because there was no reason to hurry anymore. The night had stretched wide, offering space instead of pressure. Nearby, a delivery driver leaned against their vehicle and looked up between the buildings, surprised to find a piece of sky still visible. The city always left room for that, even when it seemed crowded. People often believed cities were made of concrete and steel, but that was only part of the truth. Cities were made of pauses between steps, of quiet breaths taken in elevators, of moments when someone stopped at a crosswalk and felt their shoulders drop without knowing why. Tonight, those pauses lingered longer. In a small cafe that stayed open late, a barista wiped down the counter slowly. Chairs were stacked neatly, and the espresso machine sat silent, its work finished for the night. The scent of coffee lingered softly in the air, no longer asking to be consumed, just remembered. The barista turned off the lights one by one, leaving the space dim and peaceful. In another building nearby, someone lay back on their couch, shoes still on, eyes closed, listening to the gentle hum of the building. Pipes clicked quietly somewhere above, and an elevator moved in the distance. The sounds blended together into something steady and reassuring, like a heartbeat the city shared with those inside it. A taxi rolled through an empty intersection, its tires whispering against the road. Above it, the traffic light changed colors faithfully, even though no one was watching. The city appreciated that kind of consistency. It found comfort in routines that continued regardless of attention. In a small park tucked between tall buildings, trees stood quietly, their leaves barely moving. They had learned to live alongside sirens and laughter and footsteps. At night, they listened to something deeper beneath it all, a slower rhythm that reminded them when to rest. A person sat on a bench beneath them, hands folded, not scrolling, not thinking too hard, simply sitting. The city did not interrupt. It allowed the moment to stretch. Back in the apartment high above the street, the person on the bed lay down fully now. The ceiling fan turned slowly, casting soft shadows across the walls. The day began to loosen its grip, not all at once, but gently, in layers. Thoughts drifted without urgency. Breathing became deeper, easier. Outside, the city continued to exist, steady and watchful, but no longer insistent. It had carried millions of stories through the day, hopes rushing forward, worries trailing behind, and now it carried rest just as carefully. It would still be there in the morning, unchanged and patient. The city never asked for hurry. It never demanded constant motion or endless attention. People brought those things with them, believing they were necessary. And tonight, at last, many of them set that weight down. The streets softened. The buildings exhaled. The lights dimmed. And the city rested, not completely asleep, but calm enough to hold everyone gently as they drifted toward their own quiet endings. The streets carried a soft glow, and the buildings stood tall and calm, holding the warmth of the day like a memory they were willing to release slowly. Traffic lights changed colors even when no one was waiting. Red became green, green became yellow, each shift unhurried and patient. The city did not rush itself. It only reflected the pace people brought with them, and tonight, that pace had finally begun to soften. In one of the many apartment buildings overlooking the street lived a man named Leonardo. He had chosen this building not for its view or its location, but for how quiet it became after dark. During the day, he moved through the city almost unnoticed, which suited him. He liked being part of the crowd without being asked to perform inside it. Leonardo was an introvert in the truest sense. Not shy, not afraid, just deeply attuned to the world inside his own thoughts. He worked in an office where conversations overlapped and phones rang constantly, and each evening he returned home feeling as though he had used up every word he carried. The city never judged him for that. It simply made room. Tonight, Leonardo sat by his window, shoes neatly placed near the door, his phone resting face down on the table. He watched the city without feeling the need to engage with it. From here, the streets looked softer, less urgent. The sounds drifted upward as a low hum rather than sharp noise. Across the street, lights turned off one by one. Leonardo liked noticing that. Each dark window felt like a small, shared understanding between strangers who would never meet. He imagined them setting their bags down, loosening their shoulders, letting the day slip away. Earlier, on his walk home, Leonardo had passed crowded sidewalks and glowing storefronts. He had felt the familiar sensation of moving through people without colliding with them, of existing quietly among louder lives. The city had always allowed that. It did not require him to explain himself. At street level, a late-night bus pulled to the curb with a soft sigh. Leonardo watched from above as a few passengers stepped off, their movements slow and unforced. He wondered where they were going and felt comforted by not needing to know. Inside his apartment, the lights were dim. Leonardo preferred it that way. Brightness demanded attention, and attention was something he gave carefully. He poured himself a glass of water and stood for a moment, listening to the building settle. Pipes clicked softly, an elevator moved somewhere far away, and the sounds blended into something steady and familiar. Leonardo had always loved cities at night. During the day, they asked for speed and confidence. At night, they offered permission to exist quietly. No one expected him to talk, to respond, to keep up. The city rested in pieces, and so did he. He sat down on the couch, not turning on the television, not reaching for his phone. He let his thoughts drift gently, without directing them anywhere. He thought about small things, the way the barista at the corner cafe wiped the counter slowly before closing, the trees in the park that seemed to listen more than they spoke, the traffic lights changing faithfully even when no one was watching. These were the details Leonardo noticed. These were the moments that made the city feel kind. Outside, a taxi rolled through an empty intersection, its tires whispering against the road. Leonardo followed it with his eyes until it disappeared around the corner. The city felt larger and quieter all at once. In a small park between buildings, a lone figure sat on a bench, hands folded, simply sitting. Leonardo recognized something familiar in that stillness. He felt connected to people in moments like these, not through conversation, but through shared silence. As the night deepened, the city softened further. Sounds grew rounder, less sharp. The air cooled just enough to feel like relief. Leonardo lay back on the couch, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned slowly. Shadows moved gently across the walls, and his breathing matched their rhythm. The day loosened its grip. Not all at once, but patiently. Leonardo did not feel lonely. He felt held. By the walls around him, by the building beneath him, by the city outside that continued to exist without demanding anything from him. It would still be there in the morning, just as it always was. The city never asked for hurry. It never required him to be louder or faster or different. It accepted him exactly as he was, quiet, observant, complete. And as Leonardo drifted closer to sleep, the city rested with him, carrying his stillness as gently as it carried everything else. As Leonardo lay on the couch, the ceiling fan tracing slow circles above him, his thoughts began to wander in the way they only could at night. Not sharply, not insistently, but like leaves drifting along a calm river. He thought about how long he had lived in this city and how, despite its size, it had never overwhelmed him in the way people warned it would. The city had always seemed to understand him. There were days when Leonardo felt invisible walking through crowded streets, and days when that invisibility felt like freedom. He liked knowing he could pass through entire afternoons without being required to explain himself. The city allowed that kind of quiet participation. It did not ask him to raise his voice to belong. Earlier that evening, while returning home from work, he had taken a longer route than usual. Not because he was lost, but because he wasn't ready to arrive yet. He had walked past a bookstore with warm lights spilling onto the sidewalk and paused just long enough to glance at the shelves through the window. He hadn't gone in. Just knowing it was there had been enough. He had crossed a bridge where the city reflected itself in dark water below, the lights trembling slightly with every ripple. Leonardo had stopped for a moment, resting his hands on the railing, watching the reflection distort and reform. He had liked that about reflections. They reminded him that things didn't have to be perfectly clear to still be real. Now, back in his apartment, those small moments returned to him softly. The city seemed to store memories for him, returning them gently when the day quieted down. Outside, the night continued its slow work. A distant siren passed without urgency, its sound softened by distance. Somewhere, a window opened, and laughter drifted briefly into the air before fading again. The city did not cling to these sounds. It let them come and go. Leonardo shifted slightly, pulling a light blanket over himself. He felt the pleasant heaviness that arrived when the body finally realized it was safe to rest. His breathing deepened, and with it came a sense of ease he rarely felt during the day. He thought about how people often misunderstood introversion, mistaking it for loneliness or reluctance. Leonardo knew differently. He felt most connected when nothing was being asked of him, when presence alone was enough. Nights like this reminded him that connection didn't always require words. The city outside seemed to agree. Traffic thinned further. Streetlights hummed softly, illuminating empty sidewalks and parked cars resting exactly where they had been left. The buildings stood quietly, their many rooms holding private lives, separate but close, like pages in the same book. Leonardo imagined all the other introverts scattered throughout the city at this hour. Sitting by windows. Walking alone through quiet streets. Reading. Thinking. Breathing. He liked the idea that they were connected without needing to meet, each finding their own pockets of calm within the same vast place. His eyes grew heavier, but his mind remained gently awake. He remembered a time years ago when he had worried about whether the city was the right place for someone like him. He had feared it would demand too much noise, too much speed. But over time, he had discovered its softer layers, the early mornings, the late nights, the spaces between. Those were the hours the city truly belonged to him. The ceiling fan continued its slow turning. Shadows drifted lazily across the walls. Leonardo felt himself sinking deeper into the couch, as though the apartment itself was cradling him. The city outside did not intrude. It stayed where it was, steady and dependable. Tomorrow would come with its meetings and conversations and movement. Leonardo knew that. But tonight, there was no need to prepare. The city wasn't asking him to anticipate anything. It was simply letting him be. And as sleep finally approached, quiet and unannounced, Leonardo felt grateful, not in a loud or emotional way, but in a soft, steady one. grateful for the city that never asked him to hurry, for the night that made space for stillness, and for the calm that arrived when he allowed himself to slow down. The city rested on, and so did he. As the night grows still, remember this: rest is part of growth. Silence is part of wisdom. Sleep peacefully. The earth is listening. As the night grows quiet and the story comes to rest, we're glad you spent this moment with us. If these gentle stories help you relax or make bedtime feel calmer, you're always welcome to return. You can subscribe to Bedtime Stories to find more peaceful nights like this one. And if you enjoyed tonight's story, a simple like helps us share it with others. Sleep well. We'll be here when the night needs a story. Good night.